Delighted to introduce you to our first guest, CEO and founder of Day One, Ricky Doyle. Ricky is a serial entrepreneur and investor, and has got a really interesting journey on how he's actually started his career within technology, and then has gone on to create a series of organisations and also be an investor in a number of organisations. Ricky, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, George. Pleasure to be here.
Is there anything you'd like to add to that introduction before we get started today?
No, that sounded much better than I could.
Brilliant. Well, Ricky, what I'd like to do with today's conversation is really sort of take it back to where it all started for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the key bits that I really like to start is, what was your sort of education journey like? So take me back to sort of your earlier years in school,
Yeah.
And then what that journey looked like.
Well, if you can't tell from my accent, I went to school in South Africa. And for me, school was, I would say I wasn't a highly interested in school. I enjoyed the environment, but maybe wasn't academically focused. So for me, it was more about the sport side of it, the interaction with kind of friends and that type of thing. As I got into high school, I probably became even disillusioned might be the wrong word, but less engaged in school. And in hindsight, I probably didn't do myself any justice. I was too interested in many other things. Like, I think a lot of people, I had dreams and aspirations that where I believe school wouldn't aid me any of this. The dream of becoming either a professional footballer or, in my case, I wanted to become a professional racing driver. And I thought, well, what is maths going to help me when I'm going around the corner at 100 miles an hour? So school, like I say, I enjoyed the environment. I probably didn't dedicate enough of my time to the academic side of it. And my journey finished at that kind of 16 age, which is similar to kind of finishing GCSEs. And the school and I had an agreement that if I passed, then it would be my opportunity to leave. And I went off and tried to pursue a different route from there. So actually went from there into kind of college, the college system in South Africa. But that was probably even worse for me because of not necessarily the lack of discipline, the expectation that you should be more disciplined, and I wasn't. So I just didn't turn up and that type of thing. So yeah, school was great, met a lot of great people, but probably didn't produce any of the academic results that maybe one would expect.
Yeah, no, to be honest, I think I can resonate a lot with your journey. I think I enjoyed much more the social element to school, but I think actually that really sort of helped kickstart where I was going in my career, more sort of an engaging type role and stuff. So is there things from sort of your education, I take the academic side away, but actually, say for example, I know that you're an avid networker and stuff. So do you feel actually that started to build some skills that you've then sort of obviously developed much more in your professional career?
Yeah, actually, I don't think so. When you do some of these personality tests and that sort of thing, I'm really on the border of kind of extrovert and introvert. So I think I've learned the skill later in life to be more engaged with people, and I don't think I'm a very good networker. I'm a good in one-on-one situations where I kind of meet people and we have a connection and a relationship. I'm really invested in those types of things. I'm terrible in a crowd environment where there's lots of people and the objective is to go and meet as many people as you can to network. There, I'm not so good. So to answer your question, school didn't really help me with that. I would say I probably learned that more as I left school, and probably when I became a waiter. One of my early jobs when I was a waiter, kind of forced me to have to, inverted commas, sell. And actually I quite enjoy that, and I've developed that capability through my professional life. But certainly nothing, there's nothing I can think from school that has aided me now, in all honesty.
I think, and just finishing on the sort of educational piece, one of the things I'm always key to sort of find out is actually that family influence. So, for example, you mentioned that you you wasn't the most academic, but also that transition from school into college, and because you didn't have necessarily say the certain disciplines for actually that more independent learning. What was sort of your family's background in education? Did they have similar routes? I went to college and then went into careers, or did they have slightly different sort of background?
It's a great question, and probably I haven't discussed this too much. And so my mother was a really young mother. I think she fell pregnant when she was 15 with me, so she had to. Obviously, a young child at 16 had left school herself and hadn't kind of progressed through to any kind of formal education. My father passed away when I was relatively young, so kind of school and kind of education from a family perspective, I don't think. I think the only person in my kind of extended family that has gone to university are cousins of mine. And so my grandparents had immigrated from England, from the UK to South Africa. I think my grandfather gone to night school to become an engineer, but it wasn't a formal higher education path, if you like. So, and not having that influence, I think maybe shapes your own experience in that kind of learning environment, because you look at the people in your extended family, you kind of look up to your grandfather, whoever maybe he didn't go to university, so why would I? And I think that's a very key role in kind of influencing people to take one path or another.
Yeah, no. Thank you very much for sharing that, Ricky. And I think one of the bits that I'd like to sort of move on to is that you mentioned there around the waiter. And I'd like to really understand that very early part of your sort of employment career, because yeah, I'd just be really interested to understand the type of roles, because actually what you do sort of now, I can imagine just from the mention of the waiter role, is a lot different to those roles that you would have had at the early part of your career.
Yeah, absolutely. And just as I finished college, then I moved to the UK with my mother and sister, and it was probably for the first time I realized how important qualifications are, because I remember kind of arriving, and once you've got over the kind of novelty of moving to a new country, you then like, well, I need a job. I'm not going to school, I'm not going to college, so I need to find some type of work. And then you start looking back then, this is a little bit before the internet days, you look in the local paper, and even jobs then were asking for kind of, I had a qualification no one understood, but first of all, because I came from a different country, so no one was kind of aligned to maybe then what may have been O levels. So I didn't have any of those. So those kind of fundamental qualifications to get these early stage jobs, I didn't have. So randomly, a friend of a friend said, well, there's a labouring job going up at the local golf course, which was in our village. I lived out in Hertfordshire. They're looking for people. Do you want to go try? And I kind of turned up there. The guy said, look, can you carry a spade? Can you dig a hole? Yeah, that's good enough for me. And I started there as a labourer for kind of the first year of being here. And actually, you know what? I really enjoyed that job. One, maybe it was because of my first bit of independence to earn a little bit of money, at £2.32 an hour. That was in the pockets, and but I learned quite quickly that maybe I had a work ethic. So I even remember my first day at the golf course. It was so the basic wage was £2.32 an hour, but the head greenkeeper said, "Do you want to do any overtime?" I thought, I've never heard of overtime before. And he said, well, we pay time and a half. And I did the quick calculation. I went, absolutely. Now I'm in the 3-something an hour. So on that very first day, I remember doing 3 or 4 hours overtime. And I was, so quite early I learned this, effort equals reward. So if I'm prepared to put more hours in, then I'll get paid a little bit more. So I went from that, and actually, as I said, I really enjoyed the environment. It's linked to sport. I love sports and actually being outdoors, and there were a lot of great things about that job. And I feel like in most, it doesn't matter what job you do. I think if you showing that you are enjoying it, and you're working hard, people recognize that in any job. I think whether you're working at a McDonald's or like me on the golf course, someone will always recognize that. And actually, the head greenkeeper came to me and said, really like what you've done. Why don't you think of doing a course? Now, here was an opportunity for me to do a qualification in greenkeeping. And it was quite elaborate. There was an opportunity to travel to the US and all these things. And actually, I turned it down and I went, no, do you know what? I'm going back to motor racing. And I got involved became a mechanic for a motor racing team because that was my dream. And this was this opportunity to go and live that dream. Like most dreams, they are dreams and the reality is completely different. So I spent a year gaining some really amazing experiences. We went around Europe and a lot of hard work. I didn't make any money. That came to an end, and then I kind of fell into this cycle, and I think a number of people fall into it is, well, what do you do next? Yeah, so the mechanics stopped. So I'd been a greenkeeper once before, so I became a greenkeeper again. Then moved back to South Africa for a little bit, came back to the UK. Then it's like, actually, and we're living in central London, no greenkeeping jobs around unless I moved out. So that's when I became a waiter, and I had no real waiting experience beforehand. Blagged my way into a place in the West End. That's where I started to learn these skills, how I actually enjoyed being with people and this kind of selling piece, and the reward that came with that. And one of the moments that really stuck out for me, this kind of, again, effort and reward, different skill set, because now you're selling, you're not doing the physical side, was I'd served this, it was a London cab driver, and he brought his wife and her sister for a meal. And it was an American chain that I used to work at. So they'd been to America before. They loved this chain. It was now opened in London. Anyway, it was a late afternoon. Anyway, so I served them, and we had a really good time with them. And the cab driver came up to me afterwards, and he had a fiver in his hand, so he kind of crumpled it in his hand. And he shook my hand and said, really good job there. Thank you for looking after us. And if I look back on it as I sit here now, it was kind of a real big thing for me there. This actually, if you look after people really well, you treat them in the way you would want to be treated, what a different experience could be. And even if it's going to a restaurant, and maybe that stood with me even into business, is just do the right things right. Don't try and pull the wool over people's eyes. Always try and be credible, authentic, honest in how you do business. And I think if you do that more often than not, people will come with you on the journey. So that was these what I would maybe call blue collar jobs. Went back to a golf course, and then I got my break. This was the late 90s of my then girlfriend, now wife, said she was going to transition into IT because there was this big skills gap. Everyone was getting into IT. Everyone was making money. And I had no aspirations of wanting to get into technology. In fact, I never wanted to work in an office. I remember a very specific story where during this period when I think I was at the bartender or waiter, I was standing in the city, and I went to see a friend of mine who worked at one of the city offices. I don't know where it was. And I remember exactly where I was. I was on the corner of Cannon Street and Towergate Hill, right where the station is. I was standing outside there, and I was in a pair of jeans and a t-shirt, and I was looking at people going around. I thought to myself, I will never be a slave to the corporate world. I will never wear a suit. These guys are all crazy. Why are they running around here? Look at me. I've got this independence and freedom. And I remember that moment so well. And then I met my friend, and anyway, so that was in the back of my mind. When I went on this, what I call a computer course, I thought I'll do this for a year and then I'll go back to being a greenkeeper. And one of the key reasons for me doing this particular course was irrigation systems on golf courses were becoming computerized. And I thought if I learned a little bit about a computer, I could then manage the irrigation system. That's my rationale behind moving into IT. Never even considered getting a job in IT. I just thought I'd go back to what I knew. Anyway, I do this course. Actually, the very first college I went to, they did an aptitude test to get in. So entry requirement is aptitude test around kind of cognitive ability for logic. So they give you one of these scenarios. triangle, triangle, triangle. What's next? My brain works that I don't care what's next. Just give me what's next, and I'll figure it out. And at the end of the results of this test, they said to me, you shouldn't get into IT. Your brain doesn't work in the way people who work in IT do. I thought that was a little bit strange, but anyway, someone's telling you that with some authority, I suppose you believe it. The second college I went to had a slightly different criteria. They said to me, "Can you afford to come here? This is what the fee is." I went, you know what, I can't really, but maybe I could cobble the money together. They said, well, look, if you can get the money, you can join. Fortunately, had a family friend who said they would loan me the money to go on this course. So anyway, I do the course. At the end of the course, one of the local banks, I actually did this back in South Africa because it was a little bit cheaper. Someone phoned the bank and said, have you got a junior engineer you could send our way? And the lady that ran the course, and I've told the story a few times, Sharon received, Sharon, I think I have got someone, and she wasn't a social connection or a friend of mine. Maybe I stood out a little bit older than everyone else at the college, but I think if I reflect on that, and I'm always forever grateful to Sharon for this. Maybe she saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, because I just didn't know how I was going to transition. And in all honesty, as much as I had aspirations of wanting to work in technology, because I've now developed a skill set, I still didn't believe in myself to go and get a job in that sector. I knew what I knew, and I was going back to do what I knew. And it's hard to break that cycle. And she didn't give me the job. She received a call. She said, I can think of one person to send you. She called me in. She said, do you want to go to this interview? That's all it is.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And I went there, and fortunately I got the job. And that was my day one from a professional sense. I think you have lots of day ones in lots of different things, whether it's relationships, the work environment, your mindsets, your health, whatever those things are. But for me, from a professional perspective, that was my pivot point into a professional career, that someone had given me this opportunity to go and experience. And look, the rest is history in terms of you working and then I came up with the idea for a business, and all these things are different day ones that led me to sit here today.
Brilliant. No, thanks for sharing that. Just to break that apart a bit, Ricky, one of the key bits that I've certainly sort of gathered from that is around sort of the work ethic and sort of the relentless determination from yourself, particularly because I think just to sort of understand as well. So from sort of 16 and going to college to getting that break, what age was you in getting the break? And the reason I asked that is that I think a lot of, particularly sort of the younger generation, feel that everything should be worked out and you got that dream job at 18 once you finish your college course, or 23 if you go to university and leave. So it'd be good to understand what sort of the age was when you got that first day one.
It was, I was 25, I think, when I got that. Actually, it passed 25, so like in the middle, 25 and a half or something along there. So that's 9 years of just working, and there was nothing wrong with that. I suppose the work ethic was there, and I don't know where that comes from. Maybe that comes from a family dynamic. I certainly know my mother's worked hard.
Well, I think just going back when you shared around the age your mum had yourself as well, I can imagine actually that raising a child and then being able to provide as well, I can imagine that was a big sort of influence in yourself.
For sure, and there was definitely that dynamic. I think being immigrants from the UK to South Africa, my grandfather left here from Bury, just outside of Manchester, and I think times were tough in those days for that whole generation, not him in particular. And I think they just were instilled with the work ethic, and fortunately that rubbed off on me. So I always knew if I'm prepared to work, then I'll be able to survive. That was my kind of mindset. But it took 9 years for that break to happen, and it was fortunate that it did. Life is full of opportunities. Sometimes you get lucky, a lucky break, and it opens a new path. But sometimes you just have to keep on working and believe something good will happen. A lot of it for me, if there's a couple of things I say blessed with, and maybe have developed. One is definitely that work ethic and determination. It starts with that for me. It starts with effort. If you prepare to put effort in, something will happen. The next piece is about sacrifice, and I've learned that, certainly in my latter years, is what am I prepared to sacrifice to get my next opportunity, and things like stop drinking. I don't drink, and I used to be a really heavy drinker, but I kind of also realized if I want to try and move forward, I have to sacrifice something, and maybe going to the pub and surrounding myself with people who drink, for me, was something I was prepared to do to help move forward. So it's that sacrifice, and then the third piece is just around discipline. Are you prepared to turn up every day? Are you prepared to continue to have the discipline to put the effort in? Are you prepared to have the discipline to put the sacrifice in? And I'm very simplistic, and I kind of keep that as my kind of guiding principles. And then I'm blessed with being, I suppose, an optimist. I look at everything as an opportunity. Even when in my darkest moments, I will reflect and go, okay, so how do I understand this is a terrible thing that's happened to me, to a friend, but how do we turn this into something that can be an enabler for a step forward? Again, whether you're born with that or something you develop, I'm not sure, but I'm blessed with being an optimist for sure.
That was going to be one of my questions, is how, if there was a way of finding that, or how to get that sort of, because that is a sort of, not everyone has that mindset. And sort of forward momentum, positive thinking, etc. Has that always been Ricky, or has there been a certain part in life where it was sort of an influencer that sort of started you on that journey?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's, for me, probably a lot of it comes from sports,
right?
As a foundation, and being part of a team, these kind of things where we inspire each other to. It's not a fear of losing that one has. I think it's more a case of, I love that dynamic of being part of the team. We're always trying to be better. Now, I think that's instilled in me. I can't say there was an influence that I can particularly remember which says, hey, change this dynamic and you'll become an optimist. You'll look on the positive side. But I think as I've got older, I've maybe started to understand it a little bit better. It comes down for me to a couple of fundamental things. Is I believe people, we live in a world where, like, you're really happy or you're really sad, and I'm probably, I really try and be in the middle. So my kind of baseline is, am I content? Because happiness is a moment in time, and sadness is a moment in time. So I try and reflect on that, and look inwards to go. And this is an age thing, because I don't believe young people have this inherently in them, and I certainly didn't have this. But I may have had it inside of me without me knowing. But as I've learned about it, I suppose what I'm trying to allude to is, there will always be someone who has more than you, and you will be a lot more privileged than a lot of people in your kind of level in life. So the point is, be grateful for what you have. Don't dream of what you don't have. If you want it, go back to those three things. For me, so if I look up and I go, I really want a helicopter, not that I do, but if I really did, I'm quite practical to go, okay, so if you really, really want that, what do we need to do? So put the effort in. What are you prepared to sacrifice? And what's the discipline around those things to go and work towards a helicopter? Now, these things are arbitrary, but I think you can break them down to more meaningful elements, which are, I'm stuck at home, I don't have a job. Okay, so you want a job. So if we look at it in a positive sense, I want a job. What can I do to get there? So what effort can I put in? And that doesn't just mean doing a quick search on Google to say, I need a job. What jobs are there? What other avenues? What effort can you put in? Okay. What sacrifice? Well, to get this job, actually, my first opportunity means it's an overnight shift. So I'm prepared to sacrifice going out with my friends or to make that happen.
Yeah.
And then am I prepared to turn up every day to do it? Because if I do that well, it's amazing how the next opportunity presents itself without you looking for it.
One of the big things that I think can impact, if you let it impact, is your socioeconomic background. So, for example, if you're from, say, a blue collar working class sort of generational family, to break into, like you've mentioned, the roles within sort of a bank, that was your sort of day one, and getting that opportunity. Technology as well. When you traditionally say look at, say, the working class problem, that isn't the first sector that you actually pops to mind.
Yeah.
If I look at sort of my own family, it's very much utilities, construction, and actually, without being that taking that brave decision to go a different route, which you've certainly done, can your path already be mapped out based on your family? And do you feel that actually the area, the sort of class of where you start out can impact where you can go?
I guess the correct response is yes, it does have an impact for sure. And look, these views are on my own in terms of how families what's the right word I'm looking at? Like, lead their children to different things. So I think most people are, I would say, risk averse, but would rather go with what they know. So if your father has worked in utilities, his role, and I feel like probably most people who are father figures or mothers will always try and help. I think everyone will try and help. And if I only know utilities, what I'm probably going to do is try and help you get a job in utilities because I know that, and I can help give you that level up. At least it's, and everyone's perception is better than nothing. Yeah. You don't do anything, but I have a friend who started life as a gas fitter, and he's worked his way up, and he runs a team for Color Gas, and he's done really well. And I can see it with him. The first thing he's done for his son is like, how could I get you on the tools? And that's not because he doesn't believe his son could go work in a bank, but where he can influence and help is in that way. So sometimes when we look at these socioeconomic patterns and people doing the same thing, I don't think it's done from a place, and again, this is only my opinion, done from a place of a negative mindset. You can only be a fitter. It's done from a loving place where this is a place I can help. I can have a word with my foreman, and I know we're looking for an apprentice, and I can probably get you on an apprenticeship route. At least you've got a job. At least you've got your step on that ladder. And I suppose most young people go, well, great, but I didn't have to do too much to get this job. Yeah, I'll start here. And that cycle, is very generalist. I think quite different for some families to go, I know, and then you've maybe got the middle ground, which goes, I know I've been a fitter, a gas fitter for the last 30 years. I'm just using that as an example. I want you to become a banker. And I say force, but proactively push their kids into this different life, because the mindset there is, I don't want you to go through the same things I have. So you kind of got those really wanting to help get you on the ladder. I'm on the ladder. I don't want you to follow the same choices I did. And then maybe the top end of the spectrum is, you can do whatever you like. You have this autonomy and financial backing to choose whatever direction you want to go in. I've got you. And those are the people who are quite fortunate.
Yeah.
But I say that they're fortunate to a degree in they have flexibility in what they want to do and choosing things that they love, for sure. But I think what also comes with that is a lack of direction. So when you've got too much choice, also becomes, okay, well, I'm going to start off in a whatever degree, because that's where I go. Actually, I don't really enjoy it. 2-3 years wasted. I'm gonna now change. I'm going to start on a law degree and I've got into a really good university. 3 years in, well, I know my parents wanted me to do that, but actually I hate this. I met a guy just yesterday. It was I used to draw this, and we'll come to a close on this point. So I met this young guy outside a coffee shop yesterday. He was doing taste testing for a ginger beer company. Okay, so he calls me across. He says, "Do you like ginger beer?" I'm like, "Not really," but anyway, I'll taste it. So I taste it. I go, "Yeah," and it's all made with natural flavors and that type of thing. And so I start chatting to him. We share LinkedIn because I know someone else that can help them. But then saw his LinkedIn profile later, and he was a Oxford graduate, first class degree in engineering. But he's not doing anything in engineering. He's trying to get a startup going, selling drinks. So do you know what I mean? So sometimes when there's too much flexibility and the support to go in whatever direction, it's also not healthy, because you go and spend 5 years on this degree and then you realize, actually, I don't want to do that. So no one's got it perfectly right, but like, for sure, there are some barriers to different class levels and structures that mean, what you can only do that, and that's wrong. That's how do you change that to go? It should be fair and equitable. Everyone should have the opportunity to, at least, from family members to young people, go, this is what I'd like to do. There should be no barrier, in my opinion, for someone wanting to go and do that. Like, that's the challenge to overcome, because some people do. Doesn't matter. I can't do that because I come from this background. That to me is the thing to normalize. So everyone has a fair and equitable chance at anything they want to do. But we should have no barriers.
I think that's a really good point, because looking back, particularly, I'd say sort of the last 2 decades, I feel particularly, say, if you from sort of a working class background, university was seen as, if you get to university, you're on the journey to making it. But actually, particularly sort of the career I've had working in the apprenticeship space, I'd probably say the higher percentage of people that apply for apprenticeships that have gone and studied a law degree or history degree, and so invested like financial investment of a substantial amount time, but then actually they're coming out and then going into a complete different path. But it's actually the influence of, whether it's family or that sort of guardianship, have led them to that path, because it's been seen in a way, sort of, particularly from a government perspective, I'd say not so much the last 5 years, but definitely I'd say sort of 15 years behind that, was the sort of methodology is you go to university and that's it, you're guaranteed a job. But that hasn't necessarily been the case. And I think there's a perspective and mindset from parents still that I think that there's a factor in. They still see that you've got to go down that route. But I think it's being able, as you mentioned there, if you've got the luxury to have that freedom to do it, whereas actually some young people need to be working as soon as possible to be able to provide to that household as well.
Absolutely. And just touching on that point, I think this is this problem with perception that is the hardest thing to break. And I think the only thing that breaks perception is time. And for the last however long, we've been told, finish school, go to university, get a good job. That's the structure, and it's been and the structure has kind of worked for those that have been on that path for a long, long while. I think what we're starting to see is the change of the perception to go, hold on one second, maybe that path is no longer as viable, or it's still viable, but there are other viable routes now. And and this whole thing around perception, it's going to take time, but if we keep on working at it, I think perception starts to change just with time. So I've been fortunate to travel to a few places, and it doesn't matter where we go in the world. And even for me, with my accent, this perception is, although I've lived in England, since I was 17, and I see myself as British, grown up as an adult here. As soon as someone hears my accent, kind of the perception is, well, you're from South Africa, you must love the Springboks and fries, And I've always had this thing about, I've been here this long, but you go to other parts of the world, and again, only just to finish on this point around perception, I go to Thailand, and the first thing people will go is fish and chips, and drinking tea. And I go, yeah, I get that 50, 100 years ago, but now actually the national dish is curry, and we drink more coffee than we do tea. And people are shocked by that.
Yeah.
Because in everyone's perception, that point in time, they're still seeing us at this point in time. At some point, we'll move forward, and England, from an international perspective, will be seen as something different. And probably what would have happened is in the country, we've moved forward to the next stage, but people go, oh, everyone eats curry and drinks coffee. And we go, actually, no, we've all become healthy and we eat salads and drink water. But the perception is It takes a long time for that to disappear, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, definitely. And just moving on to sort of the later part of your career, particularly sort of personally, I'm very sort of inspired by entrepreneurs and sort of how people create something from nothing. But also building a team. And you mentioned it come from your sort of exposure to sports at a young age, also being part of a motor racing team. Could say potentially being a Man United fan, probably not with the last 5 or 10 years.
We've had some glory years, by the
way. But being like sort of building that sort of diverse team as well, it'd be interesting to hear sort of that journey you went on from sort of creating your startup as well in your previous company.
Yeah, it's interesting when you say that word entrepreneur. I've never seen or recognize myself as that. As I still see myself as the guy that works on the golf course. That's where I am in my head. I don't have these delusions of grandeur around it being a startup founder, that type of thing. It's to me sometimes a little too glorified. So even the word entrepreneur, I'm always,
makes you cringe.
It does a little bit. I kind of feel like, we had a good idea, we worked hard at it, and we built a team. But I understand it a little bit more as become more experienced. So in trying to answer that question, these things I didn't know. I go back to the first business, okay, and it was myself and a friend who became a business partner. We were two techies. We knew nothing about building a team. We knew nothing about finance, nothing about marketing. Neither of us had gone on any kind of formal training to kind of get into business. It was just a really good idea. And the idea was, how do we help junior engineers improve their practical skills in IT? So when I had gone on that course, one of the things that I was terrible, I had to do those exams at the end. I'm telling you, I had to do this networking exam probably 5 or 6 times before I passed. And the only reason I passed is because I didn't, so many times I'd memorized the questions and knew how to get through the exam. But my practical, I was an experiential learner on that course, and I'd break and I'd play, and the more practical I could be, the better I learned. And maybe that was because of the mechanic working. If manual things made sense to me, I used to kind of look at irrigation systems and networking systems. So the point I'm trying to make is, sometimes, again, when we look at these things, we kind of go, wow, this person must really know it. They gain perception. They've started a business. They must have come from a really good background. They've got plenty of money behind them, and they can go and start these businesses. Where the opposite, in a lot of cases, is the truth. For us, it was, I had a young family, 2 of us. I was working full time. I did this in evenings and weekends. Our very first, my wife reminded me just the other day, one of the very first kind of servers we had, I had running out of my garage, and it made such a noise. We had a neighbor come and knock on the door. About a week later, she said, "Look, at about 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm hearing this humming coming from your garage. Wow. Do you mind kind of turning that off?" Yeah, there were these things that we just didn't know. So kind of building a team and people, it took a long time, because I wasn't. Although sports teams I was part of, I'd never built a team. At work, I was always an individual contributor and maybe had a small group that I led, but I was always an individual contributor. So when you start to think about these kind of things of building teams, I think where it hit me, I'm just trying to think of that stage in that business. We spent the first 4 years of this business just surviving. I mean, because we didn't know how to sell. We had great technology, but we had no selling skills. We had no people skills. And the very first, linking back to what you were saying about apprenticeships, we got to a stage where we went, okay, it was even longer. It was 5 years into the journey. I think we finally had a business. So for 5 years, we just survived, and I don't know what we did, but we survived.
And was that juggling with full-time work?
Exactly. Yeah. So it was working full-time and all these dynamics, but we believed, the one thing is we really believed in what we were trying to do, and it was to help, young people particularly, but not always young people, but those early stage career, in IT audience. And when we took on our first person, actually, the route we went down was, I think, because my business partner and I had come from this slightly different background, this different journey. We got an apprentice. Actually, we got two apprentices. That was our first two hires. Um, a young guy and a young lady who joined us on the thing. So, and I think because of the different journey, we probably were more focused on that. And the reality is, it's more cost effective to do for a startup business. But probably the most important thing for me was it just gave someone that opportunity. So I was kind of paying it forward, if you like, from Sharon had given me this, hey, I haven't got a job for you, but there's an opportunity. You need to go make that happen. I was mindful of that, although not deliberately mindful, but in me, I was mindful of there's probably someone out there who just needs that step. And I, those memories you have when you kind of pay it forward are amazing. And I had lots of them, lots and lots of them. We were fortunate to pay it forward. But I even remember the very first interview with the young man, and this thing about coming into the meeting with a suit. So perception was, I think his dad had told him, if you're going for an interview, you need to wear a suit. And he arrived in a suit that was, I think his dad's suit, it was too big for him. His hair was a little bit too long because he had just finished school. And he sat there in the suit, and we were sitting there, like I'm dressed now. I think when I'd left corporate world, I said to myself, going back to that street corner, as much as I won't, I didn't finish that story off, just to go back to that. I said to you, I stood on the street corner, and I would never work in the city, and there was, I'm not going to be part of the rat race. My first job when I in IT was in South Africa. When I came to the UK, my first job in the UK in a bank was on the corner of Cannon Street and Dowgate Hill. Our office was literally 100 yards from where I stood and went,
said,
I'll never work in the city. And wear a suit. And I had to wear a suit to work in those days. Sorry, I forgot to kind of finish that piece off. But going back to this perception around, having to wear a suit. And he had a terrible suit. His suit was too big. But I kind of, when I left that world, I went, okay, look, one thing we have to also ensure is, if we're doing interviews, we need to let people know this is the culture of the business. This is how, come in, feel comfortable. The first thing, if someone did come in a suit, I would ask them, are you feeling comfortable in your suit? And most of the time people would go, actually, no. I'd go, I want you to take your jacket off, take the tie off, and not that this is your one shot to shine, but I feel like I need to know the real you. So if something is stopping you from showing you the real you, then let's kind of get rid of that. And shorts and not shorts, but trousers and a shirt, so you're more comfortable, and then people start to relax, and you see beyond what the expectation and the perception should be of an interview.
No, I think that's brilliant, because I think, as you say, the reason for hiring apprentices was because actually, like the cost benefit, but also paying it forward. And I think that is when you look at the core of apprenticeships, it's changed over the last 6 or 7 years, but actually historically that has been the route, and actually being able to really sort of help startups specifically. I think there is a lot of opportunity in there, because I think, going back to perceptions and etc., particularly if you have got a family that are in professional careers and stuff, it's always the big brands, which are brilliant. They do a lot around that space. Absolutely. But they can't facilitate employment for millions of young people. Absolutely. Year on year. And actually the backbone of the UK is SME businesses. So I think it's always good to flag when you have had brilliant experiences of that. They were your first two hires.
And we took on more and more apprentices all the time. And I think, when you look at that SME space, look, I was quite proactive. So when you asked the question, how we built the team. So as I became more aware of this thing, that ultimately you need the right people in the business to grow, and that is the fundamental of it. What you have to do is be quite proactive. If you want to be proactive to provide these opportunities, I think what I found, certainly speaking to other friends who had started businesses and just connected them to that business space, is there's a desire to do those types of things, take on more apprentices, help not only on the apprenticeship side, but help take maybe people on with disabilities. Yeah, the full breadth of society being reflected in our business. I think most people are aware that that is the right thing to do and want to do it. The hard thing is how you do it. So, like apprentices, great. There's a very structured pathway for that, and anyone who's looking for an apprentice can probably pick any one of the providers and make it happen relatively quickly. But there's still a little bit of a barrier to it because the perception is from the business side, it's going to take time to get them up to speed. And they are. It's not easy, but I think the net, if you kind of had to balance the books, the net benefit of it is far greater than the cost of time you have to invest. But how do you replicate that when you are looking at things around, trying to recruit for people with disability? I remember at one stage we were in the previous business was a technology business. We wanted to put some for a requirement around using accessibility tools. So people, non-sighted people, being able to actually navigate the platform. So the developers put something in, and we go, okay, well, how are we going to test it? Oh, great, don't worry. There's a consultancy you can engage with, and they'll do this test to see that it's ADA compliant. And actually, it was not me. It was someone who worked at Practice Labs who said to me, "Why don't we get a non-sighted person to come and do the testing? Because surely that's the real test."
Yeah, not a consultant.
Yeah. Well, how are we going to make that happen? And this is where I think fear comes into play for a lot of employers. Like, no one wants to put a job ad that this is only available to a blind person. No, even I'm brave with a lot of things, but even for me, that's difficult because you just don't know where it leads, and there's a fear in the unknown. So the guy who kind of mentioned it said, well, why don't we engage with the Royal National College of the Blind? I'm like, absolutely. And so we make a call. I go up there, see this cohort of, I think, 6 or 7 students that were on a technology course. We eventually took a couple of them on work experience leading to a job. And I remember the first day, the guy's name was Andrew. And I said, Andrew, he comes into the office and meets him. And I said, look, there's this fear factor with people. Again, this is on my views only, like where it's not that they have anything against you. They're just scared of doing the wrong thing. I think that's most of our problem is that it's not that we, in that particular case with Andrew who's blind, it's not that anyone's got a problem with a blind person, but everyone's fear is like, what I don't want to do is say something wrong, do something wrong. And so what do we all do? We gravitate to doing nothing. And when you do nothing, it seems like you are discriminating against the person because you're not engaging with him, you're not helping with him. But the same as that thing with people, if you're from the pipe fitter, you're trying to do it from a place of good, get someone in there, so you don't do anything, and that's the worst thing. So I said to Andrew when he came in, I said, you're going to have to try and break the ice with everyone. We're going to have a team meeting, you need to introduce yourself, but how do we get people over this hurdle? So anyway, he says, don't worry, Ricky, I've got it. And Andrew comes in, we have this team meeting. Anyway, and we're relatively small, they're 10 or 12 people. So I say, introduce Andrew, and Andrew does a great job. He says to everyone, hi everyone, Andrew, I'm Andrew. As you can see by my cane, I'm visually impaired. I can't see anything. And there's already a little bit of the icebreaker. He says, okay, but here's the 3 things. If you see me crossing the road, please don't help me. I've crossed the road thousands of times before. It's a little bit of a chuckle. If you see me in the breakout area making a piece of toast or tea, I'm more than capable of doing this for myself. I don't need your help. And the final thing is, if anyone can tell me a blind joke that I haven't heard, I'll give you 10 quid. Everyone bursts out laughing. Now, like in that one moment, you go from Andrew, oh my gosh, we better not do anything around, to Andrew, your colleague. It's not Andrew, the blind person that's come in. It's just Andrew, your colleague. And that small intervention kind of changed the whole dynamic. Now, the only reason I tell that story is when I go back to small to medium enterprises, and you're right, larger businesses are much more well equipped to deal with those types of situations than smaller businesses. Smaller businesses who have the ability to make a much bigger impact are, it's hard. It's not that you don't want to do it. It's just, one, you don't know how to do it and how to make those things right. So it takes some bravery, and actually, I think more business owners, managing directors, CEOs of those types of businesses need to be a little braver to go, if we believe in it, actually we need to have some real action and impact to make it happen. Because if we're scared of it, we'll do nothing, and we'll just continue to recruit from the same group we always have. We won't give any new opportunities. We'll fool ourselves into believing taking on a couple of apprentices is good, and that's a good thing in any case. But to make a much wider impact, I think we need to be a little braver and understand that actually we're going to make a mistake. And with Andrew, I may have made the mistake to have that conversation, but I think he was grateful for me to have that conversation with him, because he'd rather know, and we rectified it instantly, and that was going forward. So a little bit more bravery in that. And you evolve to kind of finish it. So how you build these teams, you evolve. You have to be aware. I think you have to be true to yourself as well. I do believe that certainly in our new business, that this has to exist longer than my tenure. I just have to leave it in a better place for the next person. But I can set the foundations of what we want to do going forward, and it's being fair. I go back to the key term for me is not necessarily to try and target one group over another, prioritize one group over another, but is ensuring that we give everyone a fair and equitable chance of being part of what we want to do, and creating that environment that allows that participation to happen. That's the thing to be mindful of, and not fall necessarily into the trap of going, D&I, we have to real project on this and a project on social mobility, and then you almost go, oh my gosh, who am I going to offend if I don't do it right? Everyone knows the difference between right and wrong. Just make sure that it's fair and equitable, and give everyone you can that opportunity, and we can only do our best at the end of the day. So that's all we can ask for.
No, that's really helpful, those various examples you give on how you built that sort of number of people entering in that team. And I think that segues on, just before sort of a wrap up with my two final questions, is just particularly your new business. Because I think one of the things I've realised from employers is that they're keen to recruit from diverse talent pools, and actually that could be individuals from marginalised communities, disability you've mentioned there. One of the big ones for myself is currently just under 1 million young people the age of 16, 24 that are not in education and employment, that are currently sort of just there. And actually, I think there is a lot of employers that want to do, but they don't know where to look or how to engage. So it'd be interesting, just before I wrap up with my two questions, to just hear a bit more about your new business, and actually what that's doing to enable employers to build similar teams to how you mentioned you did in your previous one, but on a sort of more scalable way, to be able to do it.
Look, I think if you culminate everything in my journey and that I've been on, I think what I have tried to do is channel it into what we're trying to achieve at day one. And I very specifically use those terms, kind of fair and equitable. For me, it is a case of, if we can build a solution that employers feel, is credible, authentic, trustworthy, we can remove some of the biases that exist. And a lot of the biases, I think, come from more of an unconscious place than. There will always be people who have conscious bias, but I think most people live in this unconscious bias world.
Yeah, and it is like doing it in that way, rather than, I think what we've seen particularly over the last 5 years is a lot of training around unconscious bias, for whether it's sort of hiring managers and etc. like that. But I think it's about moving it, like switching it slightly, and these are the things that you need to do to be able to sort of get certain outcomes, rather than actually trying to sort of, you can do it that way, and I think actually it's more psychological, longer term piece, and actually the realistic point of being able to do that within a certain amount of time, given the volume of people. But actually, if you can start to just change people's way of thinking of actually hiring from sort of all pools, rather than actually we go to these top universities because we've got these candidates and they've come for the last 3 decades and etc.
Perception.
No, definitely. And one of the questions that I've got, so I've got 2 questions just to finish up on. The first one is, if out of all the sort of famous people you may like, if you could choose one of them for one day, who would it be and why? It can't be Eric Ten Hag. I know how much you like him.
I'll keep it away from a sporting context. There's one person that came to mind straight away, and maybe it's a cliche, I'm not sure. But if I kind of had to go back in history, this person isn't living, but I'd love to meet Nelson Mandela. And purely from the viewpoint of there's so many things that were wrong in his life and the adversity, but how do you find that inner strength to overcome it? Because I think that's something we would love to teach people. So you kind of go back to teaching people about unconscious bias, and I think we become so structured in these things that people, because they're very prescriptive. What is it in? Because this is a human emotion. So I'd love to know, if I could meet him, what is this thing inside you that we bottle up and we could give to people to take a little sip of whatever that is, to just be, okay, let's overcome. Because the easiest thing for him would have been, hold on a second, I'm going to go against anyone that's wronged me in the past. But his mindset was, no, hold on a second, I don't want what happened to me to be repeated in the future. Let's come together to solve the problem. And that's a real mindset that I'd love for more people to have. So now when you came to hiring and all these things, you forget about what's happened in the past. And you're kind of making fresh decisions on how do we make this better in the future. So he would be the one person I'd love to have a conversation with, spend some time with.
And I think he definitely sort of embodies, you mentioned earlier in our discussion around sacrifice, sort of discipline, because I can imagine that many times throughout his journey, you could have easily sort of just give up and not so that sort of sacrifice and discipline. And that brings me on to my final question: is what bit of advice would you give someone that's looking to start their day one story? And that isn't just aimed at sort of a young person, because I think sort of the work at day one is for all ages, all types of backgrounds. So actually, what would be that advice if it is, say, for example, someone reskilling to get into a new role and etc.?
And it's not only from a work perspective. I think it's almost in every dynamic in life. The famous quote is, don't make it one day, make today your day one. And I think that's the easy one to kind of throw out there. But the advice I'd give to someone starting out is, look, if you want to do something, I'm going to link it back to those 3 things. If you want to do something, put some effort into it. And that starts today. That doesn't. It's easy to put it off to tomorrow. Today is your day one. So it's consciously, making that decision to do something. Put effort into it. What are you prepared to sacrifice to get this thing that you want? And there may be nothing, but unfortunately, for most things in life, it will take an element of a sacrifice to ultimately get what you want. And then don't give up. The discipline to keep on doing it. It's the same as, if you kind of equate it to saving money or losing weight. So I've been on a few weight loss things, and you start off a diet, and in the first week you go, I can't believe I've only lost 2 pounds. This thing isn't working. And you stop. I'm saving money. In the first week I only save a £5. What's a £5 going to do? It's not going to change my life. But do that for every week for a year. Now all of a sudden you've got 250 quid saved. You've lost 10 pounds of weight, whatever it may be. And it's that discipline to keep on going. So that's what I would say is don't wait until tomorrow. Today, it starts today, and that mindset can help. It's out there. Everyone has the capability to go and make a new start for themselves. just doesn't happen for you. You have to make it happen.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for today's conversation, Ricky, and I hope all the listeners enjoyed.
Thank you.